media. My name is Jessica Bowman, and I am with SEOinhouse.com. We specialize in how you do SEO at mostly large global companies, and I work with some of the biggest brands in the world. I literally wrote the playbook for executives on how to understand what's needed to do SEO in-house. And I have this slide for you to check out in case you find there's anything useful for your SEO program. So with that, let's begin with the meat of this presentation. I want to start when you think about data. I want you to think about segments and how you can slice and dice your data into different patterns. Too often I see teams looking at more of the bigger picture or too much of the whole, but often the issues are in particular segments. So you want to view things in segments. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. When setting up your monthly or regular reporting, you want to have some predefined segments. The most commons are country, subfolder or directory, template, breadcrumb, and business division. Some of the less common ones are the CMS platform instance. A lot of enterprise level companies, you have different CMS platforms being used throughout the site. So you actually want to segment sometimes the data, looking at different platforms to see if maybe it was this particular platform's problem or this particular platform's problem. Some issues I find are related to particular languages. So it's great if you can segment by language. Also by product line or product category. So maybe you don't do this for every product line or every product category if it's something you have to do manual, but maybe something that you do in a bigger picture. I find this especially good for troubleshooting things within particular business lines or in essence, stakeholders. And then the last one I have here are pages targeting keywords. Pages targeting a keyword cluster or topic. So this is probably something you're going to manually create, and it's probably just going to be a tier 1 or tier 2 categories. Nothing significant, but I just like to use that to say, okay, how did, for example, let's say you have an e-commerce site, how did this particular category fare after the algorithm changes or after a particular release? Now let's talk about the Core Web Vitals segments. So when we think about Core Web Vitals data, there are certain ways that we can segment this. The obvious is going to be mobile versus desktop, but there are some less obvious or less common metrics that you can use or segments you can use by extracting data from the Crux API. So you can use the desktop 4G, desktop 3G, mobile 3G, navigation types, and form factors. And those two are actually new. They were launched, I think it was April 30th. Now, since April 30th, Chrome has been transferring the data. So we're just coming across that 28-day cycle of new metrics. So having a full month of metrics for navigation types and form factors. Okay, now that we know the segments, let's talk about particular metrics. Now, the SMX team actually wants me to focus a little bit more on the Core Web Vitals, but it would be incomplete to talk about metrics and action items without actually listing out metrics that I look at and think you should look at on a regular basis. So I'm going to go through these, and these might be something you download the slides and compare with your particular program to make sure your monthly analytics, to make sure you're doing or looking at these particular metrics. If you are wanting to know how to take action on them or what I'm looking for on them, I'm actually going to be doing a webinar on this because we won't have time to cover that today. So here are things related to crawling, indexing, canonical, how many pages are indexable, and then hreflang. There are many hreflang pages. I think this is where I see a lot of things being missed when people look at hreflang. So this is a nice list to compare with what you're already using. The last one here are the XML sitemaps and status code. And this is another good one to screenshot to make sure that you're actually looking for these particular issues. Okay, the next set, we're kind of making a pivot and going over to Google Search Console. These are all the things I particularly look at Google Search Console. Now, most of you already look at all these things. It's going down the left navigation. So you're probably looking at these already. Same with these. You're probably already looking at all of these metrics. But this last slide, a lot of you probably aren't looking at. And these are the crawl stats. They are found in settings. So they're not really listed in the left navigation. You get to them through settings. And I find them good to keep an eye on. There isn't time to go over these in detail today, but as I said, I'll be giving a webinar on these metrics and how I use these and when I use these. I think they're good in use cases because there's many things that could cause changes within these particular metrics. But again, I do find these interesting to keep an eye on and look for potential risks and opportunities. All right, now let's go from the list of all metrics you should be looking at to a deeper dive on core Web Vitals metrics that you should be looking at, and then how to use this data to identify action items. So the first question you have to ask is, well, which URLs should we focus on? I think a lot of times when we look at core Web Vitals data, it is a lot of noise because there's just everything. It's hard to determine where do we even start. So I want you to think about where you focus on by a constant reduction of the URLs. So you'll have all URLs on your page. You'll have indexable URLs. You'll have URLs that actually have the crux data. You'll have URLs that are not scoring good. So the real user metrics data is not good. And then you can narrow it down even more to improving real user metric scores or the crux scores, the scores you export from crux. When there's an opportunity for improving those scores to aid in the organic ranking, that's where you would want to prioritize your time and efforts. But too often, this data alone is too high level. So you still need to figure out where you need to focus. So we can narrow it even further. So best in class companies will actually narrow the list even more by omitting the URLs that have no chance of ranking. So you take all those with scores and then you say, okay, we might score well, but which of these actually have a chance of rankings? These would be excluding pages such as those with too few products, too short of text, unoptimized text, having a low business priority, and a low keyword volume. Now, the low keyword volume, may actually have an opportunity to rank, but it's not really going to have a good return on energy. So if we want to prioritize and focus on the biggest revenue potential, these are the ones I would reduce even further. So in essence, we take this chart and identify those with the biggest lift potential, lift both in rankings and traffic and revenue. So a lot of you will say, hey, I want to do that, but where do I get that data? How do I get these segmented lists? So this is a list of where you will get each of those different sources and how you get that, come to this conclusion to get to that number 6 biggest lift potential. Okay, so you're probably now asking, how do you know if improving Core Web Vitals could actually aid in SEO rankings? And I think there are some example things to consider. One, you look at URLs that you're not already a top ranker. So above and beyond whether or not you have the too many products, too little text, look at, are we already a top ranker? If we're already in position 1, improving it may not grow traffic. It may help you maintain what you've got over time and help minimize fluctuations in the search results, but you're probably not going to grow much more. Okay, number 2, your page content is already keyword rich. So in essence, it's already been optimized. Number 3, the core web vitals are low, but your top ranker scores are high. And then you are, meaning when I say number 3, your core web vitals are low, but your top ranker scores are high, but you're not at the tippy top yet. So you're probably maybe ranking in positions 2 through 5, 2 through 8. Okay, number 4, you're scoring low in Core Web Vitals metrics. That's a requirement. I just want you to also remember that don't assume improving Core Web Vitals scores for a few pages are going to improve traffic and rankings for all pages. So I think that's a misnomer, a misconception people have, is that you do a couple things to improve it, Core Web Vitals metrics, and maybe you do improve it on some pages. Those are the only pages that are going to see an impact as a result of that. It is not going to impact the site as a whole unless you improve metrics for the site as a whole. Okay, the next question you might be asking is, where do we get these real user metrics? Okay, so the most obvious place that you're probably going to get it is Crux. So the Crux API is probably the best place to do it. You can get it URLs at scale and with individual URLs. PageSpeed Insights will give you this for some URLs, but you can only get them one-on-one, one by one, so URL by URL, so that's time intensive. The other place you can get is Lighthouse, but again, that's also one particular URL at a time. And the last potential source is code on your site. So in essence, you generate it and put that data into a database that you then mine, and you have real user metrics data. And I think that's a good thing to do. You can get far more comprehensive data than what Crux is going to give you, but it's probably not something that you should be using in isolation, because Crux data is the data that Google is using. So you always want to keep an eye on the data that Google is actually using for rankings. Okay, the next question you're probably asking is, what if there are thousands of URLs with the biggest potential? Because if you're an enterprise level site, that's exactly the case. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to collate all the data at scale and then look for patterns. So you narrow down your biggest list, then collate all the data that you can from the Crux API for that biggest list, thousands of URLs, and then look for patterns of what you see as issues. And I find developers and product managers are fantastic at this. They are really good at just spotting it. So if you can have kind of a working session with them to go over what you've pulled, they will start to see things pretty quick. And then step 3 is just choose a few representative samples to analyze. Look at different templates. So let's say you're going to choose 3 URLs, pick 3 different templates. Consider a variety of widgets. So consider pages that have different widgets rather than the same widgets. Likely after reviewing 3 to 5 URLs in detail, meaning analyzing them to figure out what you need to do to improve your Core Web Vitals metrics, you will start identifying most issues on the site that are holding back your Core Web Vitals metrics. And by the way, when you start doing that, you'll fix them for those pages, but often they're resources that are used across many pages. And therefore, you will start seeing some improvements across many pages. It doesn't mean they're all going to lift. It depends on how much you improve the Core Web Vitals metrics on each particular URL. Okay, now let's dig a little deeper into the levels of core web data that's available to us. And so this is where we usually all start as the SEO community. And it's just way too high level. This data comes from Google Search Console, and it's just not enough. I think what we need to start doing is making sure we're getting Crux data, and so that we can segment by device type, because that's really important. Understanding, okay, by device and each particular metric. Yes, you can get this in Google Search or in other tools like Google Search Console. And I think for your origin for the whole site, you can get it for the whole site. Oh, PageSpeed Insights. So this will help you do it for the whole site, and then also a lot of URLs at scale. So you can get this at scale for many URLs. In this particular example, there are no reds. We have some yellows, which is not good. And then we can segment by connection type to understand what the issues are. So here is where we're taking each device and then narrowing it down even further by connection type. So we can see all 4G, and then we have the phone 4G, desktop 4G, and then all 3G, and then the phone 3G, and then we would have had desktop 3G, which got cut off. So this tells us that, hey, we've got a problem, but it's in the 3G connection speed issue. But the question is, where and why are the 3G connections so slow? Now, what happened is that in one project, we looked at the device type, the speed and connection by country. So we actually saw this, and then we dug in one layer deeper by country, and we found the problem. And the problem was actually one small country. So it was Bangladesh. And what was happening is that LCP scores for the entire page worldwide were being brought down by one country, one small country's 3G users. And so that's the value of really being able to segment the data and digging into each layer to find the source of issues. So what we knew as a result of this is that we needed to improve Core Web Vitals for 3G users in Bangladesh in order to improve the overall page score. And at that point, the company really had a choice. They either had to fix the code so that the page loads faster in the slow country, in this case it was Bangladesh, or minimize functionality in that country so that their scores improve and therefore the entire site's page score will improve for that particular URL and any other URL that was having this particular problem in Bangladesh. And so that's why taking it, and drilling can be very insightful to help you understand what's actually going on. So in my opinion, before you submit issues to development, you need two deliverables. So I'm always big about preparing SEO teams for how to submit requirements to development. So one of the things you need is what needs fixed. And I think a lot of SEO teams kind of stop there. We say, okay, here's what we found in the tools, but the development team then runs their tools on it, or they do, use the same tools, and they don't see the issues and don't understand why this is a problem. So I want you to add which users experience the Core Web Vital metrics issues, right? Device, connection speed, and if you can, country. And that's really going to help development understand how to fix the issues. And these are metrics that will move the needle. So test for these users when making fixes. And I think that's really important that you kind of call out for the development team and the QA testers. And then after the metrics improve, you want to monitor these metrics, right? After they go live, check for these particular users. Okay, now let's talk about Core Web Vitals tools. We're going to open the toolbox. So now that we know the data we need, when we know how to narrow down which URLs we care about, what happens next? Well, at that point, you start using tools. So I'm just going to go through some various kind of use cases that you may go through of things that you need to do in order to identify for development some things that could be improved. So here is the first use case is how to find JavaScript files with unused JavaScript. So perhaps you need to improve time to first byte so that other metrics are improved. So if we want to do this, we can go to Page Speed Insights, and they have a tree map. And most people miss this tree map. It's kind of cool. When you click that tree map link, it opens this window. Now, this is a visual representation of each JavaScript file size and the amount of unused JavaScript bytes. Just click the unused byte tabs in the upper right-hand corner to get this view. And then you will see the kind of diagonal shading on each colored box. That's the amount that is unused. If you look at the kind of table at the bottom, that shows each particular file. And then that last column there has blue, which is used, and red is the percent unused, or the amount unused. Now, some of this JavaScript, just a heads up when you get in to talk to development, don't assume this can be changed because they may come back and say a lot of this is unused because it's used during a user interaction. So you're measuring on initial load, but some of this is required for user interaction opportunities on the page. Okay, and then here is just a zoomed in version of that. So this is the tab you would click click where it says unused bytes, we have 3 megabytes up there. And then we have in the bottom, you can sort by the amount that is unused, right? So I talked to you about the bars, the blue and the red on the right, but there's also an amount that can be sorted. Okay, so that's a really great tool for you to use. Okay, the next use case is we need to find the impact of removing resources being called. So let's say you have found some JavaScript and CSS files that aren't even being used on the page, and you can identify this through page speed insights. Yet, they're requested. So they're not being used, but they're requested. So again, page speed insights will tell you this. You may want to actually see how much it would improve metrics if you no longer load these URLs. And webpagetest.org has a test for that. So what you would do is you would first go get a list of JavaScript and CSS files that are not being used but being called, and you can get that again from PageSpeed Insights, and you will take that list and then you will go over to a web page test, and when you kind of scroll down, you will see an option at the orange number 1 to have an advanced configuration, and then you go over, if you see number 2 in the tabs, it says block, and then number 3 in the orange 3, that is where you enter the URLs that you do not want to be called in this particular test. So this is how you test the page without the unused files. Okay, the next use case. Let's say we need to find the items that shift to troubleshoot CLS. So let's say you have a CLS issue, but you need to figure out what's moving. PageSpeed Insights will give you the exact list. So what you want to do is in the diagnostics section, right above it on the right, in the orange number 1, you can see there are some filters, and I think one of them is CLS that I've highlighted there, and you click that, and then you look for the avoid a large layout shifts, and you expand that, and then you'll get a nice list. And so this is a list that you will want to potentially submit as part of your change request to development. And so now, how do you give them some direction on this? Like if they need a little bit more direction, you'll go to the next tool, which is Performance Insights. So a lot of you may not know about this tool. This is in Chrome Developer Tools. And so let's say we have a use case where we need to find the root cause of maybe high CLS, LCP, time to first byte, render blocking, and so forth. Now, I find it's not great at everything. It's not going to answer all your questions. Sometimes it seems to give me insights, and sometimes I feel like it should be, but it's not there. So when it's there, it's very insightful. Okay, so how you access this is number 1 in the 3 dots. I think it's the more expansion. So you click that, and then I'm not going to walk you through how to get in there. You can download the slides, but that's how you access it. And once you get in there, I want you to change your network range. So you will choose a network speed, and then you'll run the test. Okay, so choose your network speed. I think this is like no throttling, it's small on my screen, mid-tier, low tier. So choose what kind of speed bucket you want. And then when you get into the tool, you can narrow that drop-down box, then drives the network speed. So we've got, now you can choose the actual network speed, and then you will run the test. So once you get the test results, you will see on the right, there's an Insights tab, but also a Details tab. And so when you get into the details, it will actually show you what the issues are. So it'll show you the issue type and then exactly how to fix it. Okay, here's just another example. It's really small, but it gives you an idea. Oh, here, I enlarged it for you. Okay, here we go. We've got a render blocking request, and it tells you exactly what the resource is. And then I've highlighted, like in gold or orange, the inline critical styles required for the first, basically the how to fix it instructions. Inline critical styles required for the first paint in an inline style block. So it kind of gives you some guidance on how to handle that. And then here is another example of a render blocking request. And then here is yet another example where we're render blocking. So sometimes your LCP or whatever it is you're having issues with will be render blocking as the root cause. So if you go in here and you drill in here, you'll find some good insights on how to handle those. Okay, tool number 5. The use case for this one is we need to find how metrics change while interacting with the page. So one of the problems with a lot of the tools like Lighthouse and Page Speed Insights is that they don't they don't interact with the page. So there are some metrics that are important metrics, such as first input delay and interaction to next paint. They're not going to be visible when you go to these tools and try and get some metrics. So if you come over to Lighthouse, you can actually interact with the page and then the metrics will change. So I think that's available in the Lighthouse Chrome. Now, there's also a extension, which I'm going to talk about next here. You can also use this Web Vitals extension, and that will help you as well as you're interacting with the page. In this case, we're getting desktop metrics from that tool. Okay, which leads us to the next tool, the Web Vitals extension. So the use case for the Web Vitals extension is that you want to find core Web Vitals quickly for pages as you are viewing them. So I love this. I have it and I just kind of always have it on. Then if I have a page that I'm questioning, I have some data right there. I just click the button in the amongst all the extensions, the Chrome extensions, and this window opens up. And so here's a URL underneath the screenshot to the tool where you can download it in the Chrome Web Store. So this tool is getting metrics based on your load. It's not pulling the Crux API data, right? So what you're experiencing is what it's going to report here. You can click the extension button. Oh yeah, and it opens up. This is just a slightly zoomed in view of the Vitals extension dropdown box. And notice it has FID and INP. That is because I interacted with the page. So normally until you interact with the page, it has nothing. But once you interact with the page, that's when those metrics begin to start populating. And another cool thing about this tool is when you are in Chrome Developer Tools, on the console tab, it will actually inject these metrics, which are great because this is where a lot of times developers will interact with the page, is on this area in this section of Chrome. And so now you can actually see some of that data and they can expand it to get more information. That's actually what you'll see here. Now, the last cool thing about this is that you can also have a setting where it gives you this heads up display. So this is probably not something you always want on because it gets annoying, but when you are particularly troubleshooting or looking at some of this data on your own site or maybe a competitor site, it's nice to have it always visible. So there's a trigger, there's a setting in the extension that will trigger this to always appear. Okay, now let's talk about the RUM data, so real user metrics data. I would say this is tool number 7. And I say it's a tool, even though it's data, because it's curated data. It's pulling it and organizing it in a very particular way. This is data that I actually get from a tool called RUM Runner. It was created by Detlef Johnson, who is a veteran technical SEO guy. And it is a coming soon. So he and I have teamed up to offer this to clients. And we were even working with agencies or will work with agencies if this is something you want for your clients. But what I want to show you here is what is available and how you can look at the data that's curated and then how you can get some next step action items. Okay, so all of this is data you could get for yourself, right? But not everyone has the skills or capacity. So I'm going to walk you through just some of the reports that we have been offering to clients. I think it's the metrics you should look at to understand where issues exist so that you can help guide development to focus on what will actually move the needle. And this page here is just kind of a high level scorecard. It's really the first few columns are kind of the major metrics. Then we've got the pass fail, and then an SEO opportunity. And again, the opportunity it's a proprietary metric that Detlef came up with that basically identifies the opportunity to aid in SEO rankings, but it is based on your current score versus what your possible score could be. Okay, the next view is of Lowe's versus Home Depot. So it's looking at a particular page on two different websites, so competitors. And we can see they all fail. They both failed in all the different devices. But what we can notice the fixes column, so I want to show you here, is the fixes column. You can actually identify what, based on what you're pulling back from Crux, you can score and determine whether or not things are basically the solution complexity, basically how difficult is that solution. And then this helps prioritize what you're actually going to work on. So here we have the RUM data segmented by page type, connection speed, and the actual page, along with the organic ranking lift opportunity, the next steps defined, and then the next steps complexity. All right. You're also going to want these particular metrics. They're the notable metrics that are mentioned in Page Speed Insights, but they're not the core web vitals. There are additional important metrics, and that's time to first byte, first contentful page, and first input delay. So you want to make sure that you are keeping an eye on those metrics as well. And then the next view is the view developers and product managers will probably want to see. It's taking all of it together. So what I've showed you are different like segments of it. This is kind of the big picture, everything in one view. I think this is something that product managers and developers will actually want to see and take a look at more closely. And here's an example of when you can report on this over time. So when you have a tool that will actually extract the data, keep it, and then you can report on it over time to show whether or not you're improving or not improving in these particular scores. And then this is a new set of metrics in Crux that are
Can you
not
please do
available
me a
in
favor?
PageSpeed
So
Insights,
can you
and
please
it
connect me
is
from
this
my
one is the
phone
navigation type. So this is part
with
of
this
what was
platform
launched
so I can
in the
access
Crux data on
either by
April
home also?
30th. That basically
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
finished the
sure.
28 cycle,
Because
which would have been
the
May
thing is,
30th.
it's too late in the office, so
Well, a
that's
little before
something.
then,
Yeah, no worries.
for one
Fine, fine
complete
to go. Yeah.
month of data. So here's just, again, another example. That you can also get an audit data for 155 metrics, I think is what we got for this particular URL. So again, you don't need to do this for all the URLs. You choose some, you deep dive on them, and you'll find the patterns. You'll find things that when you improve them will improve thousands of pages, but you have to actually go in narrow and deep and for some qualitative analysis in order to identify those. And then the last kind of tool or view, it's basically the issues reported by page. So when you look at Page Speed Insights or even Lighthouse, you will find on the bulletin list in the light orange area, you have a lot of problems that are identified by Page Speed Insights. Has a meta name, viewport tag with width or initial scale, avoid legacy JavaScript to modern browsers, remove duplicates, modules, and JavaScript bundles, right? There's a lot of those different errors that come up. Well, you can actually get a list of URLs with all of those errors. Again, very important and useful for product managers and developers to start seeing the patterns so that they can understand how to go tackle this information in a way that's going to help things big picture. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. I will see you at the next XMX. But until then, if you hang out, we'll go over to Q&A.
Okay, and it is time for Q&A. Fantastic session, Jessica. Here with Jessica Bowman. You have been watching her fantastic session on, what do we call this? How to identify action items on technical SEO data. And we also have a special guest here joining us, Detlef Johnson, owner of Search Return. Welcome, Detlef. Good to have you here as well.
Good to see you again.
If you want to talk about advanced SEO people, I don't know many more advanced than Detlef, so awesome to have you here. All right. If you have questions for anything you saw in Jessica's session, now is the time to ask. Put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can over the next 15 minutes or so. And we have some questions already in there. So the first one that came in was from Lindsay. Jessica, she was asking, you had mentioned something about there being too few products. She was just asking, does that mean there's a threshold?
Yes. It's not about Core Web Vitals, actually. When we talk about too few products, I was referring to URLs that really don't have an opportunity to rank. And that those are the URLs that have thin content. So if you have, let's say, an e-commerce site that you have lots of different facets and filters, and you can narrow it down to the point where you have 1 to 3 products, at that point, those pages probably don't have a big chance of ranking. And so I see a lot of companies trying to get them to rank, but they probably won't. And so those are URLs that you can kind of exclude as noise because it's probably not going to give you what you're looking for.
Okay. Let's see. Next question came in from Jose. Detlef, this one may be for you. In a Screaming Frog crawl with PageSpeed Insights API, we can obtain crux results for individual URLs. Are they the same data?
If they're getting, Crux data from Screaming Frog, if it's coming from Crux, it's the same data. I'm not as familiar with that. That's individual. As long as it's Crux data, it's the same data. So we're dealing with Google data. It's official Core Web Vitals scores.
The one thing I want to point out about the Screaming Frog data, I don't think it does. Now, I've not looked at it in a while, but it will not extract all of the errors. So, for example, one of the reports I showed you from Detlef's Rum Runner tool was that it extracted the data of 155 audits for one particular URL. And then we got all of the errors and then all of the URLs in Crux that had those errors. So the last time I used the API in Screaming Frog, it did not pull back that level of data. But in terms of the metrics for a given URL, the scores, I think Detlef's right that it would be the same. I'm just concerned about the amount of data that you might get or not get.
Okay, great. Next question is from Tyler. How much of a lift did fixing the 3G scores you talked about with Bangladesh there performance elsewhere?
No
question.
action taken yet. And I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. But what we just wanted to point out is that's where you might find issues, right? So in their world, in the grand scheme of things, not that big of a problem. So it's not top of the priority queue. But it was eye-opening to see like everything we did wouldn't affect it unless we improve that one particular country.
Okay. We had a comment also from Jose mentioning that the Performance Insights tool will be deactivated and its replacement tool Performance is more complex, and he hasn't been able to yet obtain information of the same quality. Do you have any thoughts around that or advice?
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know they're going to discontinue that and they're going to change it over. But that's a terrific tool. What Jessica showed is it's going to be replaced with something that's similar and additional features, and sets, and options.
Okay. All right. Matthias asked, how would you adjust your strategy when in an industry, automotive industry, in this example, that is always failing the Core Web Vital reports?
Always failing Core Web Vitals reports. I think if you wanted to follow like the path I took with Rum Runner, it started a little more than a year and a half ago. Really, the first thing I did was check Crux API for things to see if there's any rum at all. Because if there's a URL with no rum, there's no reason to bother working on it at all. And that's the first step. So step number 1 is just check if there's rum. Otherwise, disregard it, because if there's other pages of RUM, you can focus on that area, and that has your ranking opportunity. Ultimately, that's what led to RUM Runner's opportunity score, is realizing, hey, there's a bunch of URLs here that have no chance. There's a bunch here that are failing and that can lift it up. So the things you look for lifting things in the most efficient way is try to find something like a template page that you know is the same template code for other things and fix it there. And the best place to start is always the homepage. Check the scores against Origin. If you're better than Origin, great. If you're worse, then you look at it and see if you can live with the results there. If you're passing still, that's great. If not, I mean, for example, Google's homepage is worse than its Origin score, generally speaking. And that homepage has just, I mean, slightly worse scores than the Origin, and it's still sailing through green. So just use your value judgment based on that kind of thing that you find.
Okay,
The only thing I
awesome.
would add
Sure,
to
go ahead.
that is it's not specific to industry. So the thing about Core Web Vitals, the question was like, hey, we're in the car industry,
Yep.
but everything you should do is not industry specific when it comes to these metrics.
100%. This is all totally independent, I should say. You can see I'm seeing similarities in industries of types of scores, but that's not really necessarily related to you can't fix it because you're an automotive store. It would be more like you can't fix it because you've got a giant LCP and it takes too long to download.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for the question. The next one comes from Daniel. What is your opinion on the importance of TTFB in comparison to the Core Web Vital metrics? Time to first byte.
Nice question.
It's like a predecessor. Go ahead.
Yeah, TTFB, okay, it comes before practically everything. Time to first byte. So, you know, the things that can load before time to first byte that can interfere are things like that you're eagerly loading using headers, like, you know, the link fetch this resource way ahead of even getting HTML and stuff. And that stuff comes down. And, you know, JavaScript can come down, all kinds of media types, anything that's like one of the HTML, you know, main types, like videos, music, whatever. So the whole point is try to get those things, you know, not to interfere with time to first byte, because that is going to affect actually it does. It affects every other score in Core Web Vitals specifically. So I'd say, you know, your time to first byte is critical. If you're failing there, that's a great place to start. And that's all about network latency. You can fix, you know, get on a better host and start using caching strategies. And a great tip here is the new data, the navigation types, gives you a sense of whether you're using cache or not, whether your users are using cache stores or not, depending on the type of site you are. You might see BF caches back forward. Someone clicking back and forward, it should load from cache, and that'll improve your scores simply by the nature of the fact that loading from cache is so fast, and that counts as a user engagement. So you're getting these navigation types because Google is basically leading us down the path, like, hey guys, look at all this stuff, look at all this caching. Different types of site strategies though, like I was looking at eBay and they don't cache, and I was thinking about it and I go, I know why, because it's auctions. You don't want to load from cache an auction price. So that's the kind of thing that can differentiate between industries, but it's very, very infrequent and